Hey, hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Scarecrow, and welcome to Classic Movie Rambles, where I talk about all the movies that I found in my closet while cleaning. This week's movie is Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, and it's an action movie from 2008. It's about 1 hour and 55 minutes long, starring Ron Perlman, Selma Blair, and Doug Jones. And the movie starts by showing where Hellboy was found. He was found on this classified mission in Scotland, and then cutting to an army base in 1955, where Hellboy's stepfather tells him a bedtime story about the Golden Army. So basically, the story of the Golden Army was that there was this war between elves and humans, and it wasn't going really well for the elves. So the Elven King made a deal with a goblin engineer to make him an army able to beat the humans, and he made a mechanical army for him. It was controlled by this crown, this golden crown, and basically the human lost, and there was a peace treaty, and the crown was separated into three parts, divided by to the different races, and there was a truce. So what happened then was that this king's son basically went to exile because he didn't believe in the truce, so he left. And then you cut to Nuada, which is the name of the elven prince. He's training in this abandoned subway, because in this world it's kind of like it's set in somewhat a present day, but there is like fantasy elements. So there are elves and dwarves and trolls and monsters, but they're basically hidden from the faces of the humans on their sight, because if they were found, they would basically be destroyed, because there are too many humans now if you compare to back in the basic fantasy times or medieval times. So Nuad is basically training on this subway with this kind of spear weapon, and has this sidekick with him, which is called Mr. Wink. He's kind of like a monster with tusks, and he has this separated kind of arm with a ball of chain instead of an arm, which kind of uses a weapon. And then we cut to an auction house, and Nuad kind of enters that place, and he's looking for a piece of the crown, and Mr. Wink is there, and he kind of just steals the crown, and he releases these kind of murderous kind of pixies on the audience, which is unexpected of this. And then we cut to the Paranormal Research and Defense, BPRD, which is basically where Hellboy and this paranormal kind of creatures, they kind of work to uphold the peace, but they also kind of stays hidden because they don't want to be in plain sight. So there's this caretaker of the main character Hellboy, which is called Manning, and he's basically, like a babysitter. But Hellboy isn't playing by the rules. He's not being nice, so he's kind of like this, rebellious teens or whatever. He doesn't really do as his caretaker tells him to. So he's basically been taking photographs of in the open. So if you can see by the cover, he's not actually like human. He's more of a demon kind of thing. So is actually part of the plot, because he's actually supposed to bring the end of the human world, but he really doesn't want to. So he cuts his horns, and he kind of try to dodge the prophecy. But it's based on this comic book principle idea, a comic book that he will eventually bring the end of the world, whether we like it or not. It's his destiny, basically. So Manning goes to see this other creature called Abe Sapien, and he's basically this fish-like creature, and he's very intelligent, and he kind of understands languages, and he has this kind of strange hand. He can read people and environments just by using his hands, and he's this kind of alien fish thingy. He's in a tank. So Manning helps him out. Manning goes to talk to him to get his help on advice how to deal with Hellboy. And so they go down the the Paranormal Institute down the corridors, and they see all these kind of crazy monsters and things, but it's just part of the normal workday, so you just go past these big monsters and whatnot. It's kind of funny. And then they reach Liz and Hellboy's room, and Liz more or less blows Hellboy right through the door, and she's basically just on fire because that's her power. She can use fire and turn into a ball of flame, basically. So they're kind of having a relationship deal, but Hellboy is basically not a good guy when it comes to relationships. He's, as I said, basically a rebellious teen. And Liz can't live with him, so he basically kicks him out. And then there is a mission that they have to go investigate this auction house, where the Pixies were released earlier in the movie. And Manning kind of bribes Hellboy with these Cuban cigars so he doesn't show himself on camera or in public. So Hellboy kind of says this funny line where I'll be silent, I'll be like a shadow. And he gets one cigar, and then it's like, and then Hellboy says like a shadow in the night, and he gets another cigar, and then they're off for this adventure. So Hellboy, Liz, and Abe goes to investigate the auction house, and Abe finds these pixie cages, and he explains to Liz that these are only used in times of war because of the royal seal which are on them. And they quickly realize that the pixies are loose, basically. And Abe's, which is a smart one, he actually explains that these are not ordinary fairies, they're tooth fairies. So they're kind of these ugly, kind of mantis-looking things, and they're called tooth fairies because they eat meat, but they go for the teeth first. So what happened is that the pixies kind of swarm up, and they kill a bunch of agents which are with them. And Hellboy kind of uses a statue to crush some of them. And during this fight, Abe basically pushes Liz back, and he puts his hand on her stomach. And he says to Liz, like, "You're pregnant." And she says, "No, I'm not." And he says, "Yes, you are," because he has these kind of alien fish powers. He can feel things, so he knows that she's pregnant, basically. And then the fight continues. And Liz basically blazes up into a big fire, and this kills the pixies, and Hellboy gets thrown out the window and he lands on a car. And the team goes out to check on him, and they're basically surrounded by photographers, and they take the pictures of Hellboy and they film him, interview him and everything, and Liz and Abe sign out autographs. And then cutting to Noad going to the council with Mr. Wink, and he's supposed to go there and see his father. So the council, before he can enter the council chamber, they tell him to basically just leave his weapons before he enters the chamber. He refuses at first, but then his sister is there, and he kind of obeys and let his weapons go. And then we cut him back to Hellboy watching TV, and actually watching himself from the events of earlier. And Abe is there too. So the mission is basically done. And Liz is in the bathroom. She's doing all these pregnancy tests, and of course she's pregnant. And then cutting back to Hellboy watching TV, and Manning is on the screen on the TV, and he just calls Manning this big idiot or something, and Manning walks in and he says something like, "You're basically not my problem anymore. We got another babysitter for you." And this is basically bad news to Hellboy. And then cutting back to Noad walking into the council chamber to talk to his father about the humans and everything, and why they hide in the shadows, and they should actually be rulers and everything. So his father and his son, they don't agree. So the elf king doesn't really have a choice. He has to basically kill his son. So so Noad basically disarms the guards, and there's a fight. And he gets hit, and he starts to bleed from his nose. And his sister also bleeds from his nose because they're basically twins. So if he is hurt somewhere or gets a bruise or cut, she does it at the same place as well. So they're connected somehow. And this basically ends with Nuad killing his father, and then taking the second piece of the crown, and basically the princess runs away with the third piece. And then we cut to the Paranormal Institute and to Hellboy's new babysitter, Johan Kraus. He's basically this ectoplasmic being. So he has like the shape of a ghost, like a mist, and he uses this mist to fill up a suit so he can walk like basically like a diving suit. And Kraus uses his powers, his ectoplasmic power, to revive one of the fairies. So they get a lead on where the fairies actually came from, so they can follow up on it. So they get this lead on this place called the Troll Market. And the Troll Market is basically this, it's basically like a black market for fantasy creatures like trolls and monsters and whatnot. So they have these special kind of glasses that can see what the naked eye can't. So they gear up and they go on this mission, and they have these kind of crazy glasses on. And Hellboy kind of says, like, how do we know if these kind of glasses work or not? They can be bogus or something. So Abe uses the glasses and he looks at Hellboy and he sees like these devil horns and this fire aura and fire and brimstone and stuff. And I think they're working. Kind of surprised and shocked by this. So they follow this old lady, which they think is an old lady. Has a lot of cats with her. And then using these kind of glasses, they kind of see it as a troll in disguise, and this troll is about to eat this cat. And Hellboy kind of says, we don't have time for this, so he kind of takes one of the canaries. The canary is basically a little bird. For some reason, trolls actually fear canaries. There's something they can't stand them. There's like tortures. So Hellboy uses this canary on this old lady troll kind of thing. Basically shows the way to the Troll Market, and she refuses, and they use the canary on her, and she basically takes them to the door, but she refused to open the door. So Hellboy kind of punches her throughout the alley, sending her flying away. And Kraus uses his kind of ectoplasmic power to open the door lock mechanism to the Troll Market. And here is a lot of cool creature effects, a lot of practical, I think. So there's basically like one of those Harry Potter scenes when they enter this Diagon Alley or whatever it's called. It's like all motion and all kind of crazy creatures going on, and basically a market with monsters. And then Abe sees Noada's sister, the princess then. And he kind of recognizes not the sister herself, but she has this royal kind of wristband with the royal seal on it. So he follows her. And Hellboy kind of interrogates the troll, and then he fights the troll to get some information. And Abe follows the princess, and then Hellboy kind of beats the information out of the troll and gets the information that the pictures were actually sold or came from this Troll Market. And then Abe follows the princess into a store, and she hides there. And Abe kind of goes in there, and then Nuala kind of basically pulls a knife to his throat. And he just says, give me your hand, and he kind of uses his power to bond with her, so that she realizes that he's not a threat, he's actually there to help them. And then Mr. Wink, this character which has been following Abe in the shadows, kind of comes in and kind of kicks his ass. And then Hellboy enters the room and tells him basically to leave. So the princess and Abe kind of runs out of there, and Mr. Wink and Hellboy has this fight, and it's a long drawn out fight. So basically what happens is that Hellboy kind of tricks Mr. Wink into fire his arm mechanism with this ball of chain into a meat grinder, and of course Mr. Wink gets stuck there, and he gets pulled in, he gets mashed, and then they kind of regroup and goes back to whatever they were doing. And then cutting to Nuada getting the news that Mr. Wink is dead. And then cutting to the princess explaining that she has the right, the last crown piece. And then Nuada arrives with a little bean-shaped thingy, and he basically tells them that now you will have to pay for what you did to my friend. And he throws the little bean thing on the ground, and it kind of goes for water. And once it hits water, it expands to this big plant thing monster, which is basically a big forest god. So Hellboy goes for the big guns, and he fights the thing, and he rescues a baby in the process, and then he uses the gun to fire at the monster's head, and he kind of cripples it a bit. And then Nuada appears again, and he basically tells Hellboy about the sides of the war and which side he should be on. And then Hellboy doesn't listen. He kind of fires at the head of the forest god, effectively killing it. And then Nuada is gone again. And then Hellboy gets kind of shit for this from the people around him, because they can't accept him being what he is. For some weird reason they start to hate him now, even though he saved their lives, basically. And Liz steps between Hellboy and the crowd, and they basically go back to headquarters. And then Hellboy has second thoughts about actually if he's doing the right thing, because the people will kind of go against him no matter what he does, because he's not one of them. But Liz kind of talks to him about it, I guess. And then Abe has a thing for the princess, and then she explains that basically what we already know, that Nuada and her has this link between them, that basically if he gets hurt, she gets hurt, kind of thing. But Abe and the princess kind of wind up liking each other, but there's like this weird barrier, and they just kind of awkwardly leaves. And then cutting to Hellboy and Johan, basically. And Johan, Mr. Krause, is basically, he's kind of disappointed in Hellboy that he can't follow orders, simple just orders. And he kind of tells Hellboy that kind of like, your temper is your weakness, basically. And Hellboy kind of nonchalantly smash Krause's kind of fishbowl head, and all this ectoplasmic kind of foam kind of goes out of it, and he thinks he's actually killed Krause. But then Krause, because he's a ghost, he kind of uses the locker room doors, basically just bash Hellboy up, teach him a lesson about it, and just leaves. And then behind his back, when Krause has kind of left, Hellboy calls him a glass hole. And then Hellboy gets drunk and gets to see Abe. And then Hellboy realizes that Abe likes the princess, so he gives him a beer. And they drink, and they sing a crappy love song together. Then cutting to the princess realizing that her brother is there. And the brother enters the premise. And the princess hides the last crown piece in a blue book, and tries to burn the map. And then cutting to Hellboy and Abe talking about women. And then the prince arrives and confronts her sister about the missing map. But he sees that she's kind of burned it, so he uses the outer casing, the cylinder which is holding the map, and rubs it against a piece of leather, and it kind of leaves a perfect imprint of the map. And then he knows the location of the Golden Army. And then he goes looking for the crown piece, but then the princess sounds the alarm. And then the Hellboy arrives, but because he's drunk, this is a one-sided fight. So the prince and Hellboy fight, and Hellboy gets stabbed into his heart, basically, into his chest, and the prince breaks off the tip of his spear. And Nuada escapes with his sister because he knows the location of the location of the Golden Army now, and basically he's the only one that can remove the spear tip from his chest, and so he escapes with his sister. And then there's an investigation basically, and Abe figures out where the last crown piece is. It's one of the books, because in one of the earlier scenes, I forgot to tell, there was like this connection between the two, and they both kind of like poetry and stuff. So he realized that she likes this kind of poet, and has to be in this book. And then they also figure out where the Golden Army is located because of the imprint on the leather, which the prince did earlier. And then Liz, Abe, and Hellboy goes against Manning's wishes, and they leave on a plane, and Mr. Krause goes with them to help them out. So they go to the map's location, which is Northern Ireland, and there they find a goblin that agrees to help them if he can get the shiny spear tip from Hellboy's chest, but Liz kind of refused because removing it will kill him. But the goblin says he knows one being that can actually remove it. So he opens the entrance to this vault, and listen, Hellboy and the goblin enters, and they go into this strange room where there is this angel beast thing. And basically she explains to them that this is Angon Un Rama, and refers to Hellboy, and he's passed out at this point. And she can remove it, but Liz kind of has to make a sacrifice, because in the end he will destroy the world, because that's his destiny, as said in the previous part of the movie. So she makes a sacrifice in that, and the angel beast thing removes the piece, the spear tips from his heart, and it's healed. And the goblin gets his treasure, of course, and Liz makes her sacrifice, and she tells Hellboy that basically you're gonna become a father, and then he wakes up. And then they go for Nuada. They go to his chamber where he is, and Abe, which is still in love with the princess, kind of believes Nuada's lie that if he just give them the piece that will spare them, and he kind of throws the last piece of the crown to Nuada, and he reforms the crown, and he uses it to get control of the Golden Army, and he just says to kill them. And then the team fights the Golden Army. Juan uses his powers, and the other fights. So first it's all going well, and kind of beat the crap out of this mechanical army. But after a while they realize that this army can't be killed, it's indestructible. He breaks an arm and a leg, it kind of builds itself back together again. And there was another thing that I forgot to mention, that the goblin that helped them in was actually the one that designed these beasts. But he couldn't really go up and help him because he doesn't have any legs. I forgot to tell him, so he's going by this little grinding kind of wheel thing, and he's kind of stacking his way forward. But it's a funny detail I forgot to tell you about. But then Hellboy realized that since the only one who can wield the crown has to be some kind of descendant of royal blood, so he challenged Nuada for the crown, because basically he's the son of the fallen one, and Amnung Unrama, as they said before. So he has the right to challenge the prince, and he does. So there's this fight, and now when Hellboy in his full form and glory, he has no problem dispatching the prince. So he takes the crown, and of course he wins. But the prince has other plans, so he tries to backstab. Backstab Hellboy, but he gets stopped, and he starts to bleed from his chest. And then they realize that the princess has struck herself with a dagger to her chest, and therefore killing herself and killing the prince in the same way. So there is this scene where Nuada basically tells Hellboy what's gonna happen after the war and everything while he's dying. And Abe has his last goodbye to the princess, and they all crumble into dust. And then Hellboy kind of jokingly says, "Oh, what can I do with all this power now, with this crown?" And Liz basically said, "No way." And she kind of uses her fire power to destroy the crown and shutting down the Golden Army. And then the team leaves. Basically, they go out, and they're basically facing up Manning because he's there and upset. And they kind of all quit on the spot, like Abe, Liz, and Hellboy, and even Krauts. They kind of quit and they just leave and walk away. And then Hellboy asks Liz something about, you're gonna be a father now. That's gonna change a lot of things. No, it's just one kid. How bad could it be, or something like that? And she just puts up two fingers. They're twins, basically. He's like, okay, and he ends on this funny kind of look on his face. He's like, okay, that's gonna be double the trouble. So, can I recommend this movie? Yeah, sure, why not? If it's on TV, give it a watch. It's one of those movies with really good creature effects, and like the story is kind of basic and stuff. But you shouldn't forget that this was actually adapted from like a comic book as well, and it's kind of hard to adapt a comic book into a film, and it takes like a monstrous budget and stuff to really pull it off. But as an action movie, it's actually really good, and you shouldn't have like really high expectations. Just if it's on, it's an action movie, it's fine. Get some popcorn, just enjoy it for what it is, basically. So anyway, thanks for watching, and take care.